Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
There are 44 days to Brexit, if you believe Theresa May. But if you believe her chief Brexit negotiator dealing with Brussels, maybe not. He seems to think no deal will be removed as an option and MPs will face a choice between deal and delay. Tomorrow, there will be more votes on the progress of Brexit, and Mrs May is facing another possible defeat at the hands of Brexiteer Conservatives. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, reports.
The Brexit chief negotiator may have let the cat out of the bag. Overheard in a Brussels hotel bar, Ollie Robbins spoke of how MPs could face a choice between Theresa May's deal or a long, very long extension of the Brexit deadline. For those who yearn to leave, it feels like the finishing line, just within sight, could move way out of view, perhaps a year away.
From the department
Theresa May in the Commons was asked to commit to the original deadline for leaving the EU.
Notwithstanding Brussels barroom chatter, will the Prime Minister rule out a delay of Brexit beyond March the 29th?
I'm grateful that he has asked me that question rather than relying on what someone said to someone else as overheard by someone else in a bar. It's very clear the government's position is the same. We triggered Article 50. In fact, this House voted to trigger Article 50. That had a 2-year timeline. That ends on the 29th of March. We want to leave with a deal, and that's what we're working for.
No, I didn't get a cast-iron guarantee from the Prime Minister that we will leave on the 29th of March. That does concern me because that is what MPs voted for last year in terms of the EU Withdrawal Act. That is the law of the land. That should be respected.
Supporters of a second referendum see it very differently.
I think it's entirely reasonable for the European Union to actually ask us to do an extensive extension, because in effect...
About a year or so sounds about right to you?
Well, you know, certainly the situation is that if we haven't managed to do things over the past 2.5 years, then I can't see why we'd be confident of doing something in the next 3 months. So does that help my cause? The answer to that is yes, probably.
Some Brexiteers' blood chilled at the thought of a long extension. They suspect the Prime Minister is privately committed to avoiding no deal and could opt for the long delay in Brexit if her deal was defeated again in the Commons.
Those who want to reverse the Brexit decision want to delay and prevaricate and want to kick the can down the street. You pick the phrases that fits that in a hope that somehow it will never actually happen. I think that is a very dangerous game to be playing. I think it is playing with fire.
And there could be a breakdown of order.
I think people would be very angry.
I'm sure that it would anger people, but I think that if we left without an agreement on the 29th of March, the impact of that would also anger people. If we started to see significant loss of jobs in the agriculture sector in my constituency, we would see some anger. If we started to see car factories closing for a month and then not reopening, we'd start to see anger. So I think, you know, the people who are making those claims need to be very, very careful.
Outside Parliament, another London taxicab standstill protest against restrictions on their routes. Critics of Brexit say it's stalled Brexit progress on many fronts. That means they're right to try to stall Brexit itself. The Sun newspaper today published the government's internal tally for how many of the EU trade deals it's got signed off to carry on with if it leaves the EU in March without a deal. It shows only 6 on track, code green, including the Faroe Islands and Switzerland, compared with 8 off track, including Canada and South Korea. 19 are marked as significantly off track and 4 marked black, impossible to complete, including Turkey and Japan.
Some countries have said that they didn't like, for example, some of the human rights elements that were incorporated by the European Union, and they would like us to drop those in order to roll the agreements over. Mr. Speaker, I am not inclined to do so.
That problem would, of course, return in any fresh post-Brexit trade talks. A prodding tweet tonight from European Council President Donald Tusk. No news is not always good news, he wrote. Still waiting for concrete, realistic proposals from London on how to break Brexit impasse. In a newspaper interview tonight, the long-standing British ally in the EU, Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, said Britain was now a diminished country, facing insurmountable and devastating economic consequences from Brexit. The ball, he said, is rolling towards the Dover cliff, and nobody on the UK side is doing anything about it.
Well, I'm joined now by the Eurosceptic Ben Bradley, a former vice chair of the Conservative Party who resigned from that role last July rather than support the Prime Minister's Chequers Brexit plan. So if we get to the end of March and the choice is, as Ollie Robbins was overheard by an ITV correspondent saying, between delay and the Prime Minister's deal, how are you going to vote?
Well, I don't accept that premise, to be honest. I think to an extent the Prime Minister's right. It sounds to me like Ollie Robbins is showing off in a bar after a few pints. It's not acceptable, it's unprofessional. Well, ministers make these decisions, not civil servants. Civil servants enact the decisions of ministers. So I'm more inclined to listen to those decision makers than to, as she said, somebody saying something to somebody in a bar.
Because it makes perfect sense that the Cooper Amendment at the end of this month gets carried, no deal gets taken off the table as an option, and then you're only left with the option of the deal or a delay, suspending the Article 50 process. So well, it's perfectly logical. It's not a mad prediction. So if it gets down to that choice, which side are you on?
I'm not on either of those sides. I think we should leave on the 29th of March. I think that has to be the way forward. That's what is the only thing that's going to be acceptable to my constituents. I'm personally of the view that we need to make that decision this month as to the way we're going forward. That 26th, 27th is going to be key because we need the time to pass legislation. And in the event that we can't agree a deal, we need the time to be able to prepare for that fully and to talk about with the European Union about how we manage that and potentially still have implementation periods in the future.
I recognise you don't like either the deal or the idea of delay, but which is the lesser of two evils? Which do you prefer?
Well, I'm certainly not going to vote for the deal without change to it, without legally binding change. I think, in the event that we can't do that, we should leave on the 29th.
So, well,
I'm not totally averse.
That's what I'm saying. There's no point in saying we should leave on the 29th. Let's assume that's off the table.
Well, that's what the Prime Minister's saying, and she makes the decisions, not Ollie Robbins.
Well, yeah, but MPs are going to vote on this in the next couple of weeks, as you know. So let's assume that Ollie Robbins is right in his predictions, and that's off the table. What you're saying is you will vote for delay rather than the deal.
I would struggle to vote for either, to be honest, and I don't know bluntly what I would do in that situation. I don't think it will come to that.
You don't know?
I don't know, because I don't think that will happen. Well, until I'm faced with that premise, you're putting hypothetical things that may or may not happen without knowing details. I'm elected to decide based on the details that are in front of me, not speculation of what might happen in a month, and I'll do that.
So you're playing your cards very close then?
Well, I can't tell you what I'm going to do in a month's time in a hypothetical, don't know what's going to happen, do we? But I don't think that will be the case. I think we need to make a decision this month. I think the 26th, 27th is the kind of key time for that decision.
OK. Do you know what you're going to do tomorrow night?
The politicians. Tomorrow night, I think I'm inclined to support the proposal as we supported last time with the Brady Amendment included. I don't think none of it's binding. I think really tomorrow is almost irrelevant to an extent in that we're waiting for the Prime Minister to come back in a few weeks' time with an improved offer.
But will you vote against the government's motion?
I'm waiting to see what the motion says, if it includes...
So you don't know what you're going to do tomorrow either?
Well, I don't know what the motion says. I can't tell you what I'm going to vote on if I don't know what the proposition is. So if it includes the option, if it's asking me to support taking no deal off the table, then no, I wouldn't support that. But we won't know that till the morning.
And why do you think it would ask you to take no deal off the table, given it's a neutral motion?
Well, if it asks us to approve exactly what we voted on last time in the House, obviously one of those amendments to the motion last time was to take no deal off the table, one that I didn't support. But those conversations about what that looks like tomorrow, what the wording of that motion is tomorrow, is still ongoing, as far as I'm aware.
Now, Liam Fox promised us 40 trade deals by the strike of midnight when Brexit goes through. That's not going to happen now, is it?
Possibly not 40. I mean, we're working towards a lot of those. Some delayed, but no reason why some of those can't be recovered. I accept the premise that obviously clearly 40 are not going to be signed and sealed by that date. I hope it won't come to that. I hope we'll have an implementation period and the time to put those together. But some of those are, major trading economies. Switzerland, for example, our 5th biggest trading partner, I think. So some major agreements there. And I know the department are working very hard to get as many of those across the line as they can.
Ben Bradley, thank you very much.
The fallout from our report last night that the UK's chief Brexit negotiator thinks Brexit could be delayed by 21 months if the Prime Minister's deal is not passed reverberated around Westminster and Brussels today. At Prime Minister's questions, Mrs May said Brexit would happen on time. In Brussels, their chief negotiator was keeping his counsel.
Behind closed doors in the EU institutions, plenty of questions. Unguarded comments made by the UK's Brexit negotiator Ollie Robbins that I overheard in a hotel bar are putting the government's strategy under scrutiny. Especially the suggestion he made that MPs will be given a stark choice in late March, either a deal or a delay to the Brexit date. Do you think they're helpful? Earlier, I caught up with the man who Ollie Robbins has been negotiating with, Michel Barnier.
No.
Do you think he needs to clarify his comments?
I don't want to comment on the comments.
You don't want to comment on the comments?
Please.
Awkward questions for the EU Commission spokesman as well.
How accurate is the assessment made by Ollie Robbins of the current state of play in terms of the Brexit negotiations?
I do not have the privilege of discussing my job with Ollie Robbins. He's not my interlocutor.
But the spokesman was only too willing to repeat that there is a process for extending the negotiation period.
We have not received any request for an extension. An extension, the possibility of an extension is provided for by Article 50 itself.
The comments made by Ollie Robbins sitting here in this hotel bar continue to cause a stir in Brussels and in Westminster. They lifted the lid on the negotiations and for many exposed the government's Brexit endgame strategy. In the Commons, the Prime Minister was asked again if she would rule out delaying Brexit.
Notwithstanding Brussels barroom chatter, will the Prime Minister rule out a delay of Brexit?
I'm grateful that he has asked me that question rather than relying on what someone said to someone else as overheard by someone else in a bar. It's very clear the government's position is the same. We triggered Article 50. In fact, this House voted to trigger Article 50. That had a 2-year timeline. That ends on the 29th of March.
The EU Council President Donald Tusk, who met with Michel Barnier this evening, tweeted that no news is not always good news, adding that the EU is still waiting for concrete, realistic proposals from London. Everyone, it seems, wants answers. Angus Walker, News at 10, Brussels.
Well, back here in the House of Commons tomorrow, there will be another test of the government's negotiating position. Our political correspondent, Romilly Weeks, is there for us. So, Romilly, another of these moments looming. How do you expect it to pan out?
Well, I don't want to disappoint anybody who might be expecting for some clarity at the end of tomorrow about our Brexit destination, with, after all, 44 days to go. But I think that is unlikely. MPs are essentially voting to reaffirm what they voted last month, that the backstop should be renegotiated. But don't underestimate the ability of the ERG, the hardline Brexit group, to give the Prime Minister a massive headache. They are objecting to the way the motion has been worded, which they interpret as taking no deal off the table. They have been in talks with the Chief Whip, which are currently unresolved, and they say that they could either abstain or vote against the government on this, with one ERG member putting it to me that the trust in the government is now so low that if the Prime Minister told him it was raining, he would still go outside to check. Does it matter if the government is defeated on this tomorrow? Well, the vote is non-binding, but the one thing that the Prime Minister was able to say after last month's vote to the EU was that it gave her a clear mandate from Parliament to renegotiate. If she's defeated tomorrow, that claim would look a little bit wobbly.
OK, Romilly, thank you very much indeed for that. Well.